Well, I suspect that governments can talk coronavirus till they're blue in the face, but the vast majority of Australians, whether they're businesses or individuals, are concerned about their fate come September. We've lost 106 people through coronavirus in 6 months. The death toll in Australia each year is an average of 440 a day. We're told to listen to the experts. Which experts? Professor David Katz is the founding director of the Yale University Prevention Research Centre. He warned us months ago, and I quote, "I'm deeply concerned the social, economic and public health consequences of this near total meltdown of normal life will be long-lasting and calamitous, possibly graver than the direct toll of the virus itself." He went on, "The employment, impoverishment and despair likely to result will be public health scourges of the first order." Well, as I've said many times, predicted catastrophe and alarmism seem to have no limits. The public have been brainwashed and indoctrinated. As the respected Australian Maurice Newman wrote recently, "Lost in all the noise is how easy it's been for those with despotic tendencies, Mr. Andrews, to take away our freedoms. All they needed was a climate of fear and the long arm of the law." Well, now the International Monetary Fund is talking about a high-speed economic train crash that will see, this is them, unemployment, debt and bankruptcies soar more suddenly than ever before. I'm not an alarmist, I'm sorry, and I'm a super optimist, but make no mistake, we are in serious territory. The figures should have us marching in the streets to offset the government shutdown of the economy. We are spending an estimated 10.6% of GDP, 10.6%. This is more than anything proposed by any other developing or developed nation. It's double that of Canada, more than triple that of Britain. India's total support is 0.7% of GDP, ours 10.6%. How in anybody's name is this money going to be repaid? And we've not yet calculated the cost of jobs lost forever, businesses closed which will never open again, a looming mental health crisis as people struggle to silently cope, and then the cost of family violence, crime and drug abuse. The Prime Minister is going to have a tough task defending this spending, doubling unemployment benefits, fully funding childcare. On JobKeeper, a casual who was on $200 a week now gets through JobKeeper $750. Hello, it's Christmas and New Year all wrapped in one. It's hard to get your head around the political troubles ahead. But can you imagine this in an election campaign? The Rudd and Gillard government spent $51 billion during the GFC in 1 year, 1.8% of the size of the Australian economy. The coronavirus response will cost an estimated 3.3% of our GDP this year and 6.1% next year. Or put another way, the Rudd and Gillard government spent on average about $2,900 per person in today's dollars to keep the economy afloat. The Morrison government's pledges so far amount to almost $8,000 per person. There have been 106 deaths, but our outlays are greater than the combined federal government spending on education, defence, interest on public debt, transport and communication, public order and safety, and housing and community amenities. And then there are over 200,000 businesses with delayed mortgage payments of $160 billion. Well, one thing can give us comfort. There are people like this young man, Adam Crichton, the economics editor at The Australian, an award-winning journalist. He's written for The Economist and The Wall Street Journal. He's worked at the Reserve Bank of Australia. He's got a Bachelor of Economics with first-class honours from the University of New South Wales and a Master of Philosophy in Economics from the prestigious Balliol College at Oxford University. And he'll be joining me every week, one of these people who knows his stuff to tell it as it is. And Adam's with us. He joins us from the studio in Sydney. Adam, good evening and thank you for your time.
Good evening, Alan. Great to be here.
Could I just take you a statement that you made recently? You said, not in a century have we had a nation become so poor so quickly.
Well, look, that's certainly true. And the remarkable thing about this is we've basically done it to ourselves. Kind of most recessions, of course, occur naturally, if you like. This is the business cycle. But this time, for the first time in at least modern history, you've had governments around the world, not just here, try to shut down their economies. And I believe in the naive belief that they can switch them back on again relatively easily and all the jobs come back. But I simply don't think that is the case, unfortunately. And I think as you alluded to earlier, this has just been a monumental disaster, and I think we're realising that more and more as time goes on. I think the episode in Victoria today is just, I think people are losing their mind. I mean, if someone said to you, look, we're going to try to wipe out the flu by shutting down society for 6 weeks, you would think that they're mad, but this is effectively the same thing.
Absolutely.
Of course there's going to be infection spikes.
Adam, you made this point, just to put things in perspective. I'm quoting you again here because your scholarship enables you to make these comments. You have said that what we are suffering will, quote, dwarf the impact of all the recessions since the Depression of the 1930s.
Well, look, I mean, it certainly does seem that way. The IMF has said only just recently that the economic output loss just in the next 2 years will be $12 trillion, and that's up from the $9 trillion that they concluded in April. So the economic situation is definitely getting worse. And of course, it's not just advanced countries too that are suffering. I mean, the far greater suffering is going to be in developing countries here. And I think this is something that, we in the West, and especially these people calling for endless lockdowns, miss. It's just that the global suffering is extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, we lose our foreign exchange earnings, don't we? I mean, if you find tourism's closed down, we can't have international travel, we can't have foreign students, the costs just mount up on the other side. The revenue losses are profound.
Yes, look, they certainly are, and we won't have a full picture of that, of course, until we get the forecast later this month and the government's budget in October. But yes, it's we focus on the spending, and as you allude to, it's more than $300 billion there. But the revenue losses are massive too. So most forecasts have the combined debt of state and federal government by the end of next year at something like $1.5 trillion. Which is unprecedented. We use that word a lot now, but it's justified.
Absolutely.
And it's a great mystery what that means for future inflation, for interest rates and our standard of living.
Well, it's just not possible. I mean, as I made that point before, when you've got over 200,000 businesses with deferred mortgage payments of $160 billion, and then come September, they've got to resume payments and pick up the $160 billion. I mean, it can't be done. Josh Frydenberg said in May, I thought this was quite staggering, the Treasurer, that in May that $4 billion of national income is being foregone every week. $4 billion.
Yep, look, that's exactly right. And now this Victorian decision is going to make that worse. The cliff in September, you're quite right. We have an unemployment rate now of 7.1%, but that is not the reality. The reality is far more like 13 or 14%, which of course is much worse than the peak of the 1990 recession, which was something like 11.1%. So we're already worse than that. And look, it's just hard to say what's going to happen after September, but certainly, hundreds of thousands of people on JobKeeper won't have jobs to go back to.
Yes, but Adam, let's just forget figures here and talk common sense. Now, I have said, and of course you get attacked for saying it, but in my reading, I have established that social distancing principle is outdated and discredited, belongs to the 30s and 40s. Now, to make a simple point, how can the Opera House ever make a quid? How can a concert make a quid? How can a restaurant, a pub, make a quid with all this social distancing stuff? And yet it's filled people with terror. They look at you and say, get away from me, get away from me. 1.5 metres in shopping malls. It's
such a tragedy. It's extraordinary.
Tragedy.
I mean, I see people driving their own cars with face masks on. I mean, that's just the height of idiocy, really. And yet it's quite common. Look, I mean, I'd go further. I think it's, some of the things what we're doing, basically go back to the Middle Ages. I mean, it's just so primitive. You'd think we might have moved on a little bit from the Spanish flu in 1919, but, what our governments are doing are even more extreme than then. And that was a far worse disease. It was indeed a very, very serious disease, vastly more serious than what we're dealing with here. Yeah. That was the last time the border was shut. It's crazy that it's shut under these circumstances.
I mentioned earlier tonight swine flu. People have even forgotten it.
No.
There were more cases of swine flu, more deaths from swine flu. Nicola Roxon said the modelling was ludicrous. There were no lockdowns, no nothing. I mean, it depends, doesn't it, Adam, on which experts you listen to. You see, they say listen to the experts. Now, I have quoted before the David Katz, who was that's right, the founding director of the Yale University Prevention Research Centre. But I also could quote Sukarat Bhakti, whom you would know, a microbiologist. He's an infectious disease epidemiologist. He's formerly of Mainz University in Germany. He said, all these measures are leading to self-destruction and collective suicide based on nothing but a spook.
No, look, you're exactly right. I would say it's the more prestigious, it's the more eminent of those scientists that actually have been saying this, because they're more concerned about being right. It's the less prestigious scientists who just want to get mentioned in the media who have been quoted. And it's also worth pointing out the media itself has done itself extraordinary disservice here. I mean, of course, it's wanted to get clicks, it's wanted to get readers by all the sensationalism, by never putting deaths in context. I mean, how many times have you heard, Alan, that 60 million people die in this world every year? You will never hear that. You will only hear 500,000 this, new infections this.
Yeah.
There are people dying all the time, and you don't get the context.
No, and 99% of these cases are mild.